The Suicide Monologues present the testimonies of people who have been affected by suicide and attempted suicide. The monologues are voiced by a range of actors. Please note that some viewers may find these films distressing. If you need help, you can talk to someone now by phoning Samaritans on 116 123. You can also contact the 24/7 UK Crisis Service Shout simply by texting the word SHOUT to 85258. For more information, please visit sheffieldflourish.co.uk or sheffieldsuicidesupport.co.uk.
Dear Kathryn, I hope you don't mind me writing this letter. A bizarre set of events happened where I met someone at a party who knew you. Someone had been talking about a book in which a woman throws herself off a building in Sheffield and survives. Well, I put two and two together and I knew that it had to be you. The person at the party gave me your contact details, so I hope that you don't mind me writing to you, and I hope it's not too much of a shock. It was a delightful surprise to me to see how much you've done with your life and how you've reclaimed your experience by writing about it. You won't know this, but I was the first person on the scene. I tried to save you. I saw you falling from the building and instinctively I threw down my bag and I ran towards you. It's weird because it was the one and only time that I've ever parked at Rockingham Street car park. The day before I'd had this pass that's normally reserved only for senior members of staff. I'm usually parking at Granville Road, and if that had been the case, I'd have taken my usual walk to work, and I would never have been part of this story. Your story. I tried to keep you breathing until the ambulance came. And I stroked your hair so that you would know that somebody was with you. Of course, you won't remember this. The police told me to prepare a report for coroner's court because the state that you were in, nobody expected you to survive. When the ambulance people took you away, after that, I didn't hear anything, so I assumed the worst. Well, Kathryn, I suppose you really weren't meant to die. And things happen for a reason. When our two worlds collided that day, something profound happened to me too. I knew that I couldn't go back to my job as a clerical officer for the council. My calling was to be a nurse. So I worked really hard on a mature access course, and I got a place at university, but a life-changing incident happened soon after I started, and I nearly lost my life in a car accident. I had to postpone my course, and I thought that my career was over before it had even started. But I'm strong, like you, and I persevered, and I went back to my course and I graduated with a first-class honours degree. And you might find this difficult to believe, but that was you that inspired me. You taught me never to give up hope. I graduated in 2007 and I became a community nurse, and I love my job. So much. So there it is. Things happen for a reason. When we were together in that moment, it was just a crease on the pages of our lives, and there were new chapters ahead in which we touched everybody from there on in. I never really understood about suicide before we shared the event together. I always thought that somebody trying to take their own life was weak. But when I saw you laying there on the concrete, still holding your bag, I knew you weren't weak. I realized that life sometimes throws us difficult things, and it can be too much for one person to bear. And I also realized how fragile life is, and how we're all delicate. So, Kathryn, I just wanted to say how proud I am of you, and I wanted to thank you for teaching me and for inspiring me. Your friend, James.
You were everywhere. He couldn't get away from you. He didn't stand a chance. We didn't stand a chance. Get £100 in bet credits. Bet £10, get £30 free. £30 bets and 100 free spins. Win a car, win a house, win a holiday. Win, 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 win. But that's not how the story goes. Not for anyone. You show no compassion or no remorse when people lose everything. Their homes, their families, their jobs, their lives. There's only one winner, and that's you. Matt was the boy that I loved, that grew into the man that I wanted to marry, the man I wanted to father my children. But that's before you got your claws into him, changed him, and stole him from me. He was a different person because of you. You turned him into an anxious person, a secretive person, a person with mood swings, and a person that I didn't even recognise. And then it all stopped, and it went silent. Apart from the scream that was. You know the type of scream that I mean. The scream of a mother losing her child. A scream that will echo in my ears for the rest of my life. The scream I heard as I fell to the floor as the police came to tell us that my lovely Matt had hung himself, all because of you. I'm going to tell you about my Matt, and you're going to listen to me. You owe me that much. He was a bit of a rebel at school. He used to fancy me, and I'd play hard to get, the usual boy-girl scenario. He used to run down the corridor and grab my bum, and I used to shout at him, and he would just laugh at me. But by college, he was being lured in by your promises. and he was nipping across to the bookies in his breaks. Matt was lovely. He was kind, hard-working, charming and funny. The life and soul of everybody. Everyone loved him. I loved him. And I loved him more than anything. But you made it harder and harder for him to love me back. I just had 2 years with him before you stole him from me and turned him into someone that I didn't know. Sometimes he'd leave me on my own in the casino with friends, just so that he could be with you and gamble on his phone behind my back, thinking that I wouldn't catch on. But I always did, and it led to no end of arguments. You had him firmly wrapped around your finger. You understood his mind and you knew how to manipulate him. You know what? You made him buzz. You made him buzz so much that he wanted to get closer and closer to you. And just as he did, you would slap him in the face. And you would leave him feeling down, depressed, angry and irritable. You controlled him like a puppet. And nothing that I could do or say could stop that. You forced him to keep secrets from me. You forced him to risk everything. I was at university working hard towards building our future together. You didn't consider me in any of this. You didn't care that I was working in a hospital with people who had catastrophic injuries. You didn't care that I was helping Matt whilst he was slipping further and further down that rabbit hole. I helped him get away from you for a while. Matt had counselling, and he thought he was doing better. But I knew different. And it wasn't long until you conned him back again. He suddenly had a big win. I only know this because I found his bank statement after his death. He lost it all, of course. I didn't get the text that he sent at 1 o'clock till 7 that morning. His parents never received the letter that he left on the kitchen table either. He just snuck away, as quiet as a mouse. He was determined to not come back. I just had 5 years with him before you took him from me. I'm gonna clip your wings. I'm gonna make you stop advertising. And I'm gonna make it so hard for you to do this to anyone else. And I'm gonna help other people whose lives you have torn apart. I am Nadine. I am 27 years old.
It was a Sunday, I remember that. But what I remember most about that day is the colour blue. Blue was the colour of her jacket, the jacket that she wore as she stepped in front of my train. It's been a long time since I've been down here to the station. I'm not a train driver anymore. It's affected me badly, you see. It haunts me even though it was 9.5 years ago. Just standing here makes me realise how little I'd been prepared for the impact of witnessing that event was going to have on me. I'll tell you what happened, shall I, now that I can talk about it. After releasing the brakes and opening the throttle, we pulled away from the platform. I guided the train through the countryside under the fading light of evening. I had to concentrate hard on the line ahead as my eyes adjusted to the fading light. When she reached 70 miles an hour, I closed the throttle and we maintained a good speed towards the next stop. I remember passing over a level crossing. We passed a whistle board. That's a white round sign with a black W which commands a driver to sound the horn, which I did. Just as I'd done that, she stepped out into the path of my train. I knew it was a woman. She held her arms out, a bit like a goalkeeper trying to block the path of an opponent. I lurched forward and I grabbed the brake controller and I pushed it into emergency. The train's coupler slammed into her upper body. It threw her down the embankment. I heard a sickening thud even before I'd fully applied the brakes. She not only bounced off the train, it was like she bounced off me too. I jumped into action. I followed all the correct procedures that I've been trained to follow. I contacted the police, I contacted my control room, and I did all the other things to make the scene safe. I remember my mind being filled with emergency drills, checklists that needed completing, but I felt nothing, not at the time anyway. It was like I'd disconnected. My instinct was to rush to her aid and try and administer some sort of medical assistance. I felt responsible for her. I wanted to bandage her up, to help her. But it was obvious that no one would have survived an impact like that. I remember wanting to run as fast as I could, anywhere just to get away from it. I felt guilty, like this was my fault. When I got home, I climbed under the duvet and I kept on replaying the events over and over in my mind like a stuck record. I thought about the police knocking on the door of the woman's family to give them the news. I didn't have feelings, I just felt numb. Everyone helped to pick me up, but then after a few days the trauma started to set in. I started to slip into a deep depression over the next few weeks. My home felt dark and I couldn't sleep. I stopped answering the phone and answering the door, and I stopped going to work. I shaved my head because I wanted to rid myself of everything that I had on me when the incident happened. 6 months I waited for counselling. I went through a myriad of feelings, from guilt to anger and despair. And then I felt deep concern for the family of the deceased. At the coroner's inquest, I was questioned extensively. The deceased family were also present. I saw her son in the corridor. He said, "I wanted to apologise to you on behalf of my mother. She should never have put you through this ordeal." I shook his hand and tried to reassure him that his pain was greater than mine. I felt a bizarre connection to this stranger. I never knew her before, yet it's someone who I have shared the most vulnerable time in her life, but where I feel connection, he feels abandonment. Where my wounds and pain will fade over time, his will never diminish. It took me a full 6 years to cry for the deceased, Mary, and also for the trauma that I suffered.
I'm 11. I sit at the front of the bus with my friend. I tell her how I'm scared that one day I'll kill myself. I tell her I think it's my destiny. I tell her that my grandma took her own life and that my mum's always trying to take hers too. This is what I carry around with me. This is my burden. The burden I've inherited of a future I'm scared of. I know you struggled, Mum. Your mum struggled too. You missed her. Our childhood was hard. You were angry. I don't think you ever felt ready to be a mum. You blamed your parents. Most of all, you blamed yourself. I don't blame you. You were my best friend, and I love you. I miss you. I miss you so much. And I never hated you, not really. And that's what hurts the most. If I didn't care, then you wouldn't be this hole in my heart that I carry around with me every day. I'm 17, and I find myself in my kitchen surrounded by these men in black uniforms. You've gone missing again. You've decided that you're going to die. Hypothermia this time is your death of choice. I've got to admit it's new and imaginative. So I'm in the kitchen and I'm on the phone to you. The police and mountain rescue are all here with me. It's quite the turnout. They can track your phone, but they can't find you. You'll only listen to me, no one else. I tell you that I want to come and find you. I beg you to tell me where you are. I promise I won't tell anyone, but I'm lying. So you tell me and I tell them, they find you, and you're sectioned again. You're angry with me. I walk into that familiar room where people are dying. You're there. Tubes and machines everywhere. I'm used to this. Snapshots hit me like a jolt. I hid them in my mind, but occasionally the trapdoor opens and out comes a painful memory which I can't stop. There's nothing I can do. A letter arrives. I have the worst attendance at school, but no one bothers to think why. I'm guilty. I'm to blame. I disgust myself. I'm skinny, but I feel fat and ugly. I drink laxatives every morning. I hate myself. I'm hated. Teachers tell me I'm a bad student. I tell them to fuck off. I'm underweight. I've not slept in months. I'm popping pills in between classes just to cope. Nobody asks me if I'm okay. No one helps. I skip school, but no one seems to care. I go home and you tell me that you're going to kill yourself, just like you said to me last night. I spend the night in your bed, not sleeping, watching you, trying to keep you alive. I wake the next morning exhausted that I couldn't give a shit about school. I have to try to keep you alive. But I failed. I failed. Every day, I carry you with me like a hole in my heart. I miss you, Mum.
Yeah, she came in last night. Overdose again. She's a regular. Yeah, I don't know why mental health services aren't caring for these people better. Well, we get them all in here. Oh, do you want sugar with your coffee? I know what some of you young nurses are like, wanting to be healthy. I mean, now this might sound a bit harsh, but I think some of these people are a bit attention seeking. Oh, you'll understand what I mean when you've been here for as long as I have. You know, sometimes I think to myself that one day she'll come in here and she won't leave. And it's hard to know what to say to them sometimes, don't you think? I mean, we don't seem to have enough training on it. And it kind of goes against everything we're trying to do here, doesn't it? You know, preserving life when they're trying to end theirs. Yeah, they all end up back in here. You'd think with these people that they'd be in a psychiatric hospital, wouldn't you? You know, somewhere safe. Somewhere where people can keep an eye on them, give them the proper support. Oh, it doesn't make sense to me. Don't get me wrong. You know I'm always professional in my care with these people, aren't I? It's just, well, I suppose I've become a bit cynical like you do after 30 years. I mean, we all get low. Well, I know I do. And I get stressed. I mean, it's bloody hard working 40-hour week, especially on A&E, and it's non-stop, as you know, from the minute we get in here to the minute we leave, and it's no easier when I get home. What with the kids, and caring for my disabled husband who's just lost his job. We're up to our eyes in debt. Oh, I have dark thoughts, all right. But I'd never do that. I mean, there's other people to think about, aren't there? Would you? Oh, look at the time. We best be getting back. It's madness out there. You done with your cup?
He passed away 6 years ago now. I thought I would never be able to function again, even at a most basic level. Life is bearable now, but it would be an exaggeration to say it was anything more than that. When Harry first told me he was going to end his life before the illness became too unbearable for him and for me, I was against the decision. Pancreatic cancer, for the record, a virulent disease. But despite the illness, there was a determination in him that he was going to do it, and no intervention from me would or could have stopped him. So in the end, I went along with him. I didn't want to be the cause of conflict in those last few precious months and weeks. when the time came for him to take the cocktail of drugs that would end his life, he was still recognisably my Harry, and not some barely conscious skeleton. He didn't want to spend weeks lying unconscious with me and his friends watching him die. And although I knew he was leaving me forever, those last few moments could not have been sweeter or more tender. See, I guess I was greedy at first, considering my own needs and not understanding what was best for him. I wanted him with me, whatever condition he was in. But Harry, in his own inimitable way, was protecting me, as well as ending his life for his own sake. And he explained this to me. I understood. There was no going back. I accepted that. I didn't want to amplify his anguish. We lay on the bed. He drank his drink. I held him close. And he died. See, the world seemed to work with Harry. I began to understand people and their motivations. Being a gay man lost its sense of shame. We only had 10 years together, but in those 10 years we found a depth of love that some people don't find in 50. Life is cruel. And he fell victim to an illness we all dread. But what a man he was. Wrenching control of it and dying on his terms, where and when he wanted to. Harry Croft, forever in my heart. I love you always. There'll never be another you.
I'm knitting this blanket. 400 stitches wide it'll be. I've agreed not to kill myself until I've finished it. I'm not afraid of dying, but I am afraid of the legacy my suicide would leave behind for the people I love. My husband, my sister, my mum, my gran, aunties, uncles, cousins, my best friend, even my therapist. I also worry about my wider friendship circle. I know it sounds odd, but I even worry about the 200 people who follow me on Twitter. I worry that one day I'll stop worrying about the impact my death will have. And when that day comes, I shall be free to jump. Too afraid to live, too brave to die. That's what I wrote in my notebook last night. I don't feel very brave. I don't want to exist. I want to stop breathing. I just want to fade away, but I don't want to kill myself, not really. But ending my own life seems the only solution that holds any hope for me right now. As long as I keep knitting my blanket, all will be okay. I have these measures which stop me from ending it all. So if I'm standing at the tube station, I make sure I stand with my back firmly pressed against the wall, well away from the platform edge until the train has stopped. If my husband hands me a packet of painkillers, I take one strip and then I ask him to store the rest at work. I devise delaying tactics and I make bargains with myself to buy me extra time. I mostly stay silent about my inner turmoil, those suicidal thoughts. Ideation, as a psychiatrist once put it. I don't think that you'd know I'm suicidal. I'm kind of halfway in between this life, halfway in between the next. I'm not really present in either. I call it the grinning madness. I live in fear of someone saying, "Are you okay?" I'm convinced that I'm going to fall apart at the seams. But my silence is cast iron. It's self-imposed and I don't consider breaking it, even for a moment. I was walking across a bridge a few months ago and I stopped. I stopped to look at the inky black waters beneath. My rucksack was heavy with my laptop and other belongings, and I just wanted to slip into the inviting darkness. Disappear with barely a ripple. My rucksack was heavy. It would have pulled me to the riverbed, but I didn't do it. I didn't do it because I was worried. I was worried that someone would stop me, save me, and then I'd live. I have a river of tears inside me. A volcano that's about to erupt. A dam that's about to burst its banks, but I feel dead inside. There's almost no point in me killing myself because something was murdered in me so long ago. As long as I keep knitting my blanket, all will be okay.
I've worked as a mental health nurse for 25 years. In that time, only one patient has chosen to end their life. Bob was his name. Bob had depression and work-related stress. He never talked about hurting himself to his GP or anyone, so it came as a shock. I knew he was in a bit of a tangle, feeling stuck with his life, but I didn't expect him to end it like that. It wasn't as if he had to wait for an appointment like some people. We managed to get him in on a cancellation to see someone straight away. He was a proud man, was Bob. He had a strong work ethic. Work was a big part of who he was. His colleagues had either been made redundant or were off sick, so he was left holding the fort on his own and feeling the pressure. His presentation wasn't particularly unusual or extreme. I'm not suicidal, Bob said to me on his first appointment. I can never do that to those who love me. Well, I viewed that to be a protective factor, on a scale of risk we use to assess when we see patients. No obvious signs were there to my mind. The risks were low. Bob wanted to see me again, and I was able to fit him in the following week by extending me a lunch break. He attended as he said he would, and I listened and I learned. We talked about how he might begin to move forward to reduce his stress. Bob, he agreed to see me again the following week. That would have been his third appointment, but he didn't show up. Bob had hung himself. I was shocked, deeply saddened and in disbelief. This singular experience still makes me question myself, question mine and the service's response, question my assessment, question the care I offered, and question the decisions I made. I made a conscious effort to speak to his GP following his death. I wanted to find out everything I could about the referral to him prior to his referral to myself. All too often, professionals can retreat into defensive silos following the death of a patient. I'm sure you've had many a patient end their life in your career, the GP said. I hadn't. On reflection, as professionals, we all felt we'd done as much as we could. I was asked to write a report for the coroner's inquest. I waited to be called to give evidence, but never heard anything other than an inquest. A verdict, sorry. I felt as if I'd been denied my own personal opportunity to find personal closure. I do wonder, looking back, had he seen someone from the community mental health team, like a psychiatrist, he might have had a better chance. Thing was, He didn't tick all the right boxes because he was considered to be low risk. Plus, he would have had to wait ages to see someone. I feel a mixture of anger and guilt. He had so much to live for, but I can't help wondering if I've missed something and I'm somehow to blame. I feel really, really frustrated. When things like this happen, there's usually an explanation. In this case, there wasn't. None of this made sense.
What do you expect me to feel after what you've done? I don't know what to think or feel anymore. I feel nothing. I'm numb. I am Olivia. I'm an only child. I'm 14 years old. I'm a child to a single parent. I am someone you didn't want. I feel like an orphan, but I'm not, because you're still here. You're still lying in that bed, still broken and damaged. They came to my school, you know, tried to soften the blow by telling me you'd had an accident and had been hit by a tram. I knew you hadn't, because Laura's mum, who works on A&E, had already texted her while we were in geography class, so she knew before me that you'd thrown yourself under a tram, willingly. I came to the hospital to see you and you'd blown up like a balloon. Didn't even recognise you. Didn't know who you were. They told me that you wouldn't know I was there, but I spoke to you anyway and you squeezed my hand. They told me to prepare for the worst and that you probably weren't going to make it through the night. My life fell apart there and then. I fell on the floor and screamed, willing for all the pain to come out of me, but it didn't. It never will. I hate you for this. I hate you. I want you to feel the pain that I feel inside. But I know you're hurting too. I love you, Dad. Please don't die. I want to run away. I want a new life. I don't want everyone to know that I am the child whose only parent tried to leave them. Gran has moved in, I can't stand it. She's moved everything around as if you're already dead. She doesn't want to be here. I don't want her to be here. I want you here, not her. I want to lie in your bed and soak up your smell, but she won't let me. So I lock myself up in my room. School have shoved me in learning base. They say that I'm a distraction and that I'm better off in a more supportive environment. I hate it there, and I hate it here, and I hate you for doing this. At night I stay out and get so drunk that it melts away all the pain I feel inside, only for it to come back the next day and for the nightmare to start all over again. I hate you. And I love you. I am 14 years old, and you tried to leave me alone in the world.
It was 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning when the policeman knocked at the door. It didn't occur to me that he was there for a personal reason. I just thought he was making inquiries about someone else's crime, someone else's tragedy. And then he said, "Are you Rosie's mum?" "Is she dead?" I asked him, but I already knew. He said she'd hung herself in the night, in the flat that she shared with her daughter and her boyfriend. It wasn't the first time she'd tried to take her own life. On her 18th birthday, she took an overdose. First of many. It felt like I was on a roller coaster for the last few years of her life. Always on the edge. Always dealing with her many crises. When she was in a good place, happy, we got on so well. She made us all laugh. She was funny, entertaining. And she was stylish. She was intelligent and interesting. But when she was in a dark place, she wasn't funny or intelligent or interesting. She drank. She took drugs. She stopped eating. They diagnosed her with a condition called borderline personality disorder. It's like something's not wired properly in your brain. She wanted to die for so long, but you never would have guessed. People like my Rosie, they don't always look sad. She looked like a happy young woman who had everything to live for. Losing someone is hard, but losing someone to suicide is harder. The suddenness, you've no time to say goodbye. And the guilt. Could I have done more to stop her? How did I let my daughter kill herself? It helps to think that this is what she wanted, that it was her choice to die. She wasn't taken away by an accident or an illness. She left of her own accord. On the 10th of September. That's World Suicide Prevention Day. Surely that's not a coincidence. I wonder, I think maybe it was her last little joke. I dread people asking me if I've got children, about my family. I dread their reaction if I have to say that I had a daughter but she died. It doesn't get easier with time. I don't know what words to use. Taken her own life, killed herself, committed suicide. How did I let that happen to the daughter I loved? These days, I help to look after her daughter, my granddaughter. She looks just like her mum. She has brought me so much joy. I don't know how I'd have got through this without her. But I worry about how she'll be affected. She doesn't really remember Rosie. I have all the memories. You never stop being someone's mum.
It's a regular occurrence for us as trauma surgeons to deal with failed suicide attempts. Males often choose the more violent methods. That's why they're brought to us here in the musculoskeletal department. That's what we're here for. Recently, an elderly gentleman was brought into A&E. He was about 76 years old and he had throat cancer. His quality of life was very poor. He couldn't sleep or eat and was rapidly losing weight and was in constant pain. Somehow he had managed to fire a crossbow bolt into his mouth. He wanted to kill the cancer. He wanted to kill himself. It was a shocking sight. It was a miracle that he was still alive. The only way he could communicate with us was by blinking. Now, thankfully, his daughter was there and she was able to verify that he didn't have any mental health issues and that he had full mental capacity to make the decision that he didn't want us to remove that bolt. In that half an hour, I had to appraise the situation and it was very clear that he did not want us to save his life. I remember when I explained to him that I wasn't going to try and remove it, that's when he noticeably relaxed. It goes against everything. Our ethos of preserving life at all costs. It's instinctive to try and save someone, to make them better. That's what my training taught me. That's what my life has been about. He just wanted to go. He just wanted to die. I don't think the decision would have been quite so easy if his daughter wouldn't have been there. That was reassuring. It's one of those things you can never be prepared for. So we got him a bed on palliative care, and 4 days later he died. We respected his wishes. And he was fairly easy to manage, but the horror of confronting that situation was devastating, awful. It was the most harrowing day on call for me. The registrar and I talked about it. We sat up, talked about it all night. We don't ordinarily do that. And when I came home, I couldn't eat or sleep for days. I needed to talk to someone, offload to my wife. Again, that's not something I would normally do. It's one of those cases that will stay with me forever. It was an extraordinary thing to witness.
My mum died because she was ill. That's what I said at her funeral. I don't know why she became ill, but I know it was the depression that killed her. It wasn't quick, like a heart attack or a stroke. It descended upon her like a cancer, engulfing her, tormenting her for years. It made her life unbearable. Of course, there were times when things were brighter. There often is with mental illness. Times when she didn't look scared. Times she could relax. Precious times. She knew how much we loved her, I know that much. Yet she struggled with the shame and the guilt for all the chaos and pain her illness caused throughout our lives. I don't know why it was that particular Saturday she brought herself here to Redmire's Dam. And I don't know what she must have been thinking to herself as she stood at the water's edge. I don't know what went through her mind as she took her last breath and gave herself up to the icy water. I don't know much at all. Can't find the words to explain. Scared that I never will. My mum died because she was ill. That's what I said at her funeral. She was fully clothed in the water when they found her, yet they never found her bag or her shoes. On the first anniversary of Mum's death, I came here to leave some flowers, but it had been drained. I just wanted to climb over the wall and run out into the mud and try and find her bag and her shoes, but what would that have achieved? She will remain a secret. And soon the water would return, and like other secrets, hers will remain hidden under the calm, dark surface for all eternity. Dad and I sat on the sofa as 3 police officers came into the room. We knew instinctively what the news was, but they still have to tell you. They have to say it out loud for you to hear, for your brain to register, for your heart to crack, for your throat to let out that noise. It's been 13 years since Mum drowned. Despite all the years of mental illness, the depression, schizophrenia, spells in hospital, the previous suicide attempts, her actual death was recorded as an open verdict, not as suicide. Ironically, Mum was a swimmer, just like me. Counting the laps and the strokes allows me to empty my head. Yet in a macabre way, it makes me think about drowning. When I accidentally swallow a mouthful of water, I instinctively cough it back up and pull up for breath. And in that moment, I wonder what it must take to fight that natural impulse to survive, to not keep going, to not keep breathing. Then I carry on swimming. My mum died because she was ill. That's what I said at her funeral.
I lied a lot about what had happened to me in the beginning. It's hard to know what to say to people. It's not like saying I've been in a car accident or I've had cancer. Hi, I'm Kathryn, I'm a suicide survivor. People just don't know how to respond to that. They're embarrassed mostly. It's not normal really, is it, suicide? Well, you think it's not normal until you actually find out that 84 people every single week in the UK complete suicide. That's fairly normal, isn't it? My suicide attempt 16 years ago didn't just happen to me though. It happened to everybody I knew, and it happened to loads of people that I didn't know as well. Incidents like that never happen in isolation, and they touch many, many people in the community. I guess it was hard for me to take on board everybody's feelings and thoughts about what had happened to me in the beginning. People were angry and people were upset. I just had enough of a job trying to process what had happened to me, never mind think about everybody else's feelings and thoughts. I was struggling just to get from one end of the room to the other in one piece. That 3-second act of standing on top of that building and letting myself fall seems to have defined who I am to loads of people. I'm no longer Kathryn, that amazing person who was a social worker, had a child on my own and managed to get a degree and buy my own house. To some people, I'm that mad woman, that nutter, that mental case, that selfish person, that woman who jumped off a building. People ask me, do I regret what happened? Well, it's a bit more complicated than saying yes. Of course I regret the hurt and the pain that it's caused a lot of people. And of course I regret having to live with this amount of pain every single day. And of course I regret spending so much of the NHS money putting me back together again. But to answer yes is an admission that somehow I was responsible for what actually happened to me, that I chose it almost. Nobody chooses to end their own life. People are pushed into it. People are pushed into it because their stress has outstripped their ability to cope. People are pushed into it because they're mentally ill, or they're really sad or lonely or massively in debt. People don't choose to end their life. Choice is a really difficult word to use. How it looks on the inside is completely different to how it looks on the outside. Choice is the only word that we have. I don't lie about what happened to me anymore. I own my story. This is my story. I like who I am now. It's been a hard story. It's been a hard journey. But it's my journey. And my journey and my story have taught me that there is always hope. There is always hope. I have to talk about this to stop the discrimination towards people like me. That's why I wanted to make this film. That's why it's important to me. I want people to talk about suicide. I want people to be open. That way we might be able to stop it happening to so many people. I am a mother. I am a grandma. I am a partner. I am a friend. I am an employee. I am a disability advocate. I'm a gardener. I'm a writer. I'm a theatre maker. I'm a businesswoman. I'm a survivor. I am a suicide survivor. I am Kathryn.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to this this chat about our piece, the Suicide Monologues. My name's Brendan Stone. I work as an academic at the University of Sheffield, and with me are Kathryn Littlewood and Penny Capper. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves to you. So, Kathryn, do you want to just say a bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Kathryn, and so I work for a charity actually, and I am the producer of this play, and I suppose a creative director as well for it.
Penny?
Hi, yes, I'm Penny Capper and I'm acting in this piece, and I've also had a little bit to do with the writing and editing process.
Great. Thanks both very much. So we're just going to talk a little bit about how this piece of work has been created, what we're kind of hoping that it might do, and what Kathryn and Penny's plans are for the future. I guess I just want to, I'm not going to say a great deal. I kind of want to get Penny and Kathryn talking, really. But just from my point of view, my academic interests, I suppose, are around mental health, and I've done a lot of work with the NHS. And the topic of suicide and attempted suicide still carries with it a considerable amount of stigma and taboo. And I think it's an aspect of mental health and contemporary life which is not well understood at all. So I genuinely see there are significant opportunities for educating perhaps healthcare professionals, clinicians, and others who work with people experience significant distress, using this sort of material to hopefully enlighten people the way they work with others, and remove some of this stigma and taboo. And I'll go to you now, Kathryn, because I guess this was really your idea, doing this work, and it emerged, didn't it, from a book that came out a few years ago called Our Encounters with Suicide. That was the sort of starting point, and I was one of the editors in that. And of course, you contributed a story, didn't you? Do you want to just say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you put a call out for people who had either had experience of suicide, a lived experience of suicide, and I responded to that and wrote a short story, and you chose my story to be published in this book. And the book contains 30 perspectives of suicide, which kind of looks at all different angles of suicide, from people that have witnessed suicide to people that have lost someone through suicide to people that are living with suicide ideation every single day of their lives. So it's quite a unique piece of work, really, because it's a very kind of raw narrative, unsanitized narrative that you've put together, Brendan. And I really liked the way that it started to think about other people's perspectives rather than just people that actually attempt to take their own lives or complete suicide. And I think that's something that, possibly we've not heard those voices before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important for me to say that there were 4 people who edited the book, and probably they were more important. Well, they were more important than me to the book, and they were Fran Biley, Alec Grant, and Judith Hare, and their work really presented us with a starting point for reflecting on this topic further. And Kathryn, why was it important for you to create these performances? What do you hope to achieve through this?
I suppose for me, it's about breaking down societal taboos. I think there is such a high level of shame attached to suicide. And as you know, I attempted to end my own life myself. And, I've gone through a whole sort of myriad of emotions with other people about their experiences of my suicide attempt. And so I've been quite fascinated in the ripple effect of that and the kind of multifaceted layers of experience that people have, and the sort of spectrum of distress that affects an awful lot of people that surround that one incident. So I wanted to bring that to life, Brendan, and I wanted to put it on stage. Originally, we had the idea to take this into a theatre. I've been thinking about this for 4 or 5 years now, and then I met Penny, actually, because Penny and I are working on a theatre production of my own book, Cultivating Mad Cow. And so Penny opened a lot of doors for me in terms of going back to thinking about our encounters with suicide and thinking, actually, I think we can do this. In fact, we can do anything. We can make theatre, and we can take this book and take some of the stories from it, put it on stage. And it was just a really strange fluke that COVID happened, lockdown happened, just as we were actually in the development process of this. And it didn't stop us at all. In fact, it actually opened up new avenues for us to engage a wider, wider actors with a lot of experience to come and work with us, Brendan.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to say that most of these stories are completely new in the sense of being publicly available. One or two of the original contributors to the book have developed their stories into monologues, but on the whole, these are new stories, quite and quite a range of different kinds of stories as well. So maybe let's just talk a little bit about the process of working in collaboration with a diversity of people, transforming their stories into these monologues, these performances, which are then on the whole performed by somebody else. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So we lifted two stories from the original, three stories from the original book, and then we asked some people in the community whether they would like to contribute their own stories to this. So we've got altogether 13 monologues. Three of them are loosely based, one of them's loosely based on my own personal experience, somebody in my circle, personal experience, and two of them are directly related to my experience, but the other 9 of them have been collected. And so I was asking people to either record, do an interview over Zoom, so that I made lots of notes. Sometimes I'd end up with 2.5 hours worth of interview to turn into a 3 or 4 minute monologue. Sometimes some of the people that have supplied stories have written stories, which I then have adapted into monologue, and then I've been working with Penny, who's just the most phenomenal editor, who's kind of been really helpful in terms of, looking at that from an acting perspective and how that would work on stage or digitally filmed. So Penny, did you want to say a little bit to add into that?
Well, I think one of the things that has been tricky, challenging in some ways, has been that a lot of people have sent us their stories. We have basically given them free rein to write their story. And when you're writing a story that's so sensitive and personal and all encompassing, that person can end up writing pages and pages, and we've encouraged that. But we know then that we have to reduce that down to a 5-minute monologue. And so the difficulty for us has been knowing what to leave out, because when you're dealing with somebody's story that's so personal and very often still quite raw, you don't want that person to feel that what you're chopping out of their story is, because you're saying that's not relevant or that's not interesting. It's all extremely relevant and interesting, but really difficult from our perspective to work out which are the most interesting and relevant pieces of information to go in a monologue. So that's been an interesting challenge for us. And we've worked with the people that have written those stories. So we've fed back to them all through the process, just to check that, they're happy with where it's going and what we've had to leave out. So yeah, it's been interesting, isn't it?
From your point of view, Penny, as these pieces have come to you and you've been thinking about turning them into monologues, performances, are there any kind of key themes which emerge from these very different stories?
Oh gosh, yeah. Of course, there are key themes that come up in all of them, and then there's a lot of variance as well. It's amazing how many things are covered across the range of the monologues. Just when you think you've covered the key themes, you're working on another monologue and thinking, oh wow, I never thought about that perspective as well. But yes, of course, there are patterns in terms of the sense of loss and grief, the emotion that people go through. So yeah, it's been a very interesting, humbling experience, I would say.
Quite a intense, demanding experience for both of you, I guess.
I think so, yeah. But I think it's part of the job, really. It's part of the job description that we have to do it because we feel very strongly that these stories need to be heard, and that just the subject of suicide itself needs to be raised, needs to be talked about, needs to be debated. We both feel quite strongly about that.
Yeah. Kathryn, the idea of this piece is hopefully to influence and enlighten various people, and I just wonder if you want to talk a little bit about what you're hoping to do with it next.
Yeah, so in some ways it's come at a bit of a difficult time with theatres, but what our plans still are is to look for Arts Council funding to take this onto a stage and take it on tour. You know, we very much see this working with a team of actors, maybe probably 4 actors that can play different parts, using personable props, which was our original idea. And we also see it being used as an educational piece as well, maybe for universities, medical students, psychiatrists. We see this having quite a far reach. One of the things I'm really keen to do is actually maybe go into a community and to take other stories, collect other stories, and put those stories into this. We see it very much as a kind of evolving process where we develop a website and people can send us stories. We can put those stories out publicly if they want that to happen. A little bit like what you've done with Story in Sheffield, Brendan, based on those kind of principles that, I think often people don't have their voices heard that are affected in that wider circle of suicide. And I think it's really important for us to listen to people if we're going to really understand more about suicide and suicide ideation. So we've got a whole load of ideas what we want to do with it. So yeah, it's an exciting time, really. Penny, have you got anything to add to that?
No, I haven't actually. I think
That's all right.
Covered it.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the actors because, some of these actors that you've managed to get on board are actually pretty well-known people in the industry, aren't they? And I gather that some have been pretty keen to be involved. I just wonder maybe talk to us a bit about how that came about, and also how the actors actually felt working with you both.
Yeah, so Penny introduced me to a friend of hers called Dave McClellan, who was always going to be in this play on stage to start off with. And we'd kind of early on identified Dave as doing the train driver monologue, and we thought he'd fit that perfectly. And Dave's a bit of a networker. He collects people throughout his career. He's brilliant at, getting to know actors. So he very quickly managed to engage other actors in the industry. One of the most, one of the famous actors is Julian Richins, who plays the first monologue, Dear Kathryn, about the letter, who lives in Canada. So this whole process has just been great because it's meant that we can work with actors through Zoom, having Zoom meetings and then filming and sending the monologues, which we would never have been able to do if we were just working locally. So, and I'm just amazed at how much love has been wrapped around this project from these actors. They've just been it's just been incredible, Brendan. It's just heartwarming. Every actor, because they haven't been paid very much for doing it. It's more like an expense. They've done it out of love for this subject and out of wanting to change things, or a lot of them have had personal experiences themselves, you know, or been touched by suicide. So they felt it a really important project. So in terms of casting, it's been a bit of a ripple effect, you know, where one actor's introduced us to another actor, and you know that's been a really lovely process. I've really enjoyed, I think Penny and I have just really enjoyed meeting and working with so many diverse people. You know, we've got people from EastEnders, Emmerdale,
Casualty.
Casualty we have, thank you. Yeah. So you know, hopefully we'll go on to do other things with these guys in the future. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been great.
Could I just add as well, I think Ian Reddington's also been a great help in recommending people. He's a local actor, but he did very well for himself. He was originally known as Tricky Dicky in EastEnders.
I remember Tricky Dicky.
Yeah, I remember Tricky
Yeah.
Dicky. And, you know, he's another one like David that's just accrued a whole load of act friends over the years, and he's been really instrumental in helping us out. And we'd not even met him before, and all of a sudden he was, you know, working really hard to try and help us with the project. So we've constantly been, like Kathryn said, overwhelmed with how kind people have been and how generous with their time.
It probably also speaks a bit to the importance of the subject that people have got on board and given their time in this way. Yeah. I mean, I think we do need to say huge thanks to everybody because, as you say, really people have just been paid expenses. It's a nominal, very nominal fee. And I think it's wonderful, really, that people have felt able to do this. I mean, Penny, do you think the actors have found it tricky to do this, or you know, to do this work remotely and also about such a sensitive subject, or are they such skillful masters of their craft that it's fairly straightforward?
I think a lot of the actors, because they're TV actors predominantly, not to say they've never worked in the theatre, I wouldn't want to assume that, but a lot of them are really sort of practiced in television acting. Yes. So they're at least used to being filmed close up and having to keep things small. In terms of whether they're used to self-taping or, you know, Zoom taping, Zoom recording, all of that, I think for a lot of actors that's been quite a new concept in lockdown, and we've all had to quickly learn how to do that. Now, hopefully, it's become second nature to most of us. So I think that it's still been a little bit challenging for a lot of those actors, but we get asked to do some weird things in this profession anyway. It's like, I think no challenge is too big, really. So most people have taken to it, and I think it does work really well on the small screen. I'm really looking forward to seeing what it's going to look like in theatre, but I think it works brilliantly on the small screen because it's the whole sort of talking heads medium.
It's a whole other thing, really, I guess, going into live theatre. And what I kind of want to talk about briefly now is some of the other work that you're doing and planning to do, the two of you. So I'm on the board of Sheffield Flourish, which is a mental health charity in the city of Sheffield, and we've done work on suicide prevention in the city, amongst other things, but we also host and support a number of creative projects, writing groups, art groups, music groups. And Kathryn, you part of your theatre work is working with Sheffield Flourish, isn't it? Do you want to just say something briefly about that?
Yeah, definitely. So a few years ago, I set up a production company because Penny and I have been working on my book to create a one-woman show around cultivating mad cow. And so I'd set up Flipping Mental Productions as a business to house that particular production. And then I was approached by Flourish, who said, why don't you come and join us as an enterprise, which I hadn't actually considered, and it made so much business sense for me to actually come under the umbrella of Flourish, which supports people like myself with mental health problems to develop enterprises. And it's just been an amazing experience. We've very quickly, Penny and I talked about the idea of setting up a drama group, so that it would give us direct contact with other people with mental health problems, so that we could help to gather stories from them, you know, and they could put their narratives into theatre as well, and so that they can learn the process of telling their story in this way. So we managed to get several £1,000s from a funder to do that, and we've got a bidding at the moment for some match funding. And we're hoping to start that in around November, December. It's a little bit tricky because nobody knows where we're going to be with COVID. So Penny's going to be facilitating the drama group. It's going to be called Drama for the Mind. It's a test and learn pilot project for a year to see how that works in Sheffield. And we're looking for, you know, around about 15 to 25 people to come and join us that have got, you know, long-term severe and enduring mental health problems, to come and join us on that journey, really. So yeah, we're excited about that, aren't we, Penny?
We certainly are, yes. Yeah,
I think it's fantastic. I think, you know, I as somebody involved with Flourish, you know, I have to say I'm really, really excited that you are working with us. And I need to show our viewers your book because you mentioned it, and we haven't mentioned it up to now. So this was Kathryn's first book, which called Cultivating Mad Cow, because you just kind of threw that in there randomly, Kathryn. So people might be wondering. Available at, well, it's available online. But you're turning this into a theatre piece, or well, you already have, haven't you?
We have. We've developed. We're now in the final stages of getting a touring. Well, we're just about to get a touring grant to take that on tour. We just hope that there are some theatres that we can actually still left for us actually to go into and show this. We've worked so hard, and it's taken 2 years of real hard slog to get that, you know, into as a, you know, a theatre piece, which we're very excited about, aren't we, Penny?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, well, as you know, Kathryn, I'm not just saying this. I'm a huge fan of your writing, and of course, there's another book on the way soon. I teach your book on my course, and I believe other universities also teach it. But I mean, one of the things I think is important about your book is that it's very much your voice telling your story of, you know, really serious mental health problems, a suicide attempt, your gradual recovery from that. The reason I say it's very much in your voice is, odd as it might sound, it's a very funny book as well as a very tragic and dark book at times. And I guess the bigger kind of message here about your work, and I guess a lot of what I've done in my career as an academic, is the importance of getting people's voices and stories out there so that those truths and insights aren't lost, so that we can learn from people's experiences. I think, you know, those of us who've lived with long-term mental health problems have often been spoken for. So it's quite a good idea to get people's voices out there so that we can speak for ourselves. And I very much see the suicide monologues as part of that. Would that capture part of the ethos of what you're trying to do, Kathryn?
Brendan, it's all about that. You know, it really is. It's all about, you know, people like myself have stories to tell, and people who manage services. You know, for me, I've kind of felt when I had my experience that services are set up more designed for the people that work there than actual people that use those services. And I think that people can learn a lot from stories from people with lived experience in mental health to try and change things. But also, Brendan, I'm really passionate about sort of trying to create a more communicative, empathetic and open society where people don't feel so afraid to talk. You know, 15 years ago, Brendan, when this happened to me, you know, it was a very different landscape, you know, and there was a lot of taboo around suicide. I feel more accepted now, and I feel more able to talk. And I think that's partly because people like myself have gone out there and talked about this. You know, there's a lot more acceptance for mental health. You know, people are more willing, employers are more willing to make adjustments and understand mental health. And that's the kind of society I want to live in. I don't want to live in a world where we have to hide behind closed doors. I don't want to live in a world where people feel more shame for their illnesses that are often created by society in the first place. I want to live in a kind society, and that's what I'm trying to do, my little bit to create that, Brendan.
Yeah, such a powerful message, which I echo wholeheartedly. That kind of shame about just being distressed is so toxic and destructive for a person to live with. Life is hard enough anyway, but then to feel ashamed because you're struggling is awful. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe we could probably close around there unless there's anything else either of you would like to say.
I just want to say, Brendan, I just thank the university for this opportunity because you guys have been amazing. I also want to say big thank you to Mary going because she's been in the background. She's been supporting this project. She's just been fantastic. She's one of your employees at the university, isn't she, Brendan?
Yeah.
And I want to thank yourself really because, you know, without you, Brendan, and the relationship that I've got with you, you know, to be able to do stuff like this, it's quite phenomenal. You changed my life 10 years ago when you created Story Sheffield. And it was the very first time that I'd been into town since my accident. And when I went on that course, every opportunity became available to me then. I got a job. You know, I didn't even consider myself being back in work, but actually you helped to create that. So, you know, and you've helped to create this as well. So you've always seemed to be interlinked to things that are happening in my own life as well, Brendan. So thank you. Thank you for being amazing. And thank you, Penny, as well. And I do want to thank Penny because Penny's just, I love working with Penny. We laugh a lot, we cry a lot, but we do get on brilliantly as creative partners. We work together so well. And in lots of ways, like Penny's acting world that she comes from, and my sort of world of disability, social care, and health, they really come together to make quite a powerful team. The contacts that Penny's got, the contacts that I've got, you know, we're a real powerhouse, aren't we, Penny?
Yeah, and in that sense, you know, I'd like to say thank you to you while we're doing the thank yous because, you know, it has been massively life-changing for me. I've been involved in theatre since I was a small child, but it's only in the last couple of years where my interest and passion about mental health has been able to marry my interest and passion in the theatre, and that has quite frankly blown my mind. So,
wow. Well, that's a good place to end it. Kathryn, thanks for the nice things you said about me. I'll drop you the 20 quid off later. Thanks for that. Yeah, so thanks for listening, folks. And yeah, I mean, I'd just encourage anybody watching this who is having any kind of difficulties. If you're in Sheffield, check out Sheffield Flourish or the Sheffield Mental Health Guide. They're easily available resources online with helplines. There's also the Samaritans, and there is a mental health line advertised via the Sheffield Flourish website. I think my advice, based on my own experience of living with mental illness for most of my life, is the most toxic thing is being ashamed and silent about distress. There are so many of us out here living with difficulty. Don't be alone. You've got absolutely nothing to be ashamed about. So thank you for watching and take care.